Hey, what's up, guys? Tetrak here. I just wanted to go over um, layers with you. I am redoing my Path of Exiles controller config because I've been using a mouse region, which I actually prefer on Diablo. So I thought I'd bring it over to Path of Exiles, and while I'm doing it, just kind of show you guys layers and the power of them and what you can do with them. They're pretty it's pretty cool what they did with this. So what you have, I'll just go ahead and start this. What you have here is action sets, your default action set. I've changed a few buttons already, but action sets, everybody knows what you can do is add another action set and then put in your, um, just basically create a new controller config and then put in a button that'll change it. So say, for instance, I want let's go ahead and create an action set just to show you. So let's say I wanted this one to be my inventory action set. Um, and then I can configure this basically any way I want, right? And then it'll be different from the default, which if I come here, say I want this, I don't know, we'll say menu, because this is what I'm going to use it for, right? My menu settings, whatever. Um, so you can go in and change each one separately. Right now I'm on menu. If I come up here to tab, uh, I can change this button to change action set. So if it'll move over. There we go. To inventory every time I hit that. And I can tell it to display or beep on change, whichever I prefer, or none. So I'm going to leave it on for right now. And then if I go back and I hit that button, you can see in the middle of the screen here, um, down here, it's going to show me changing back and forth. Now I haven't set up the inventory one, so I need to go to inventory, come over here, and then tell it to change action set back when I hit that button. So menu. Okay. I want this to be a mouse. I need some mouse control. Okay. So hitting that button will change it back, and then hitting it again is going to change it. It's not displaying the name though for some reason, but basically it's switching back and forth. And if you hear the controller, I don't know if you can hear that sound, but basically it's switching back and forth between the two, right? Um, so that's what action sets do. Basically, lets you set up more than one configuration. The problem is let's say, for instance, this is my default, and I change one button in here. It's not going to change in inventory if I want it to, because that might be the same button I want it to be. So that's where action layers come in really handy. Um, so if I'm in menu and I add an action layer, right? I'm going to call this action layer combat because I'm going to make it a combat action layer. Um, so this is the primary, the parent, right? And this is the secondary, which is the child. And you can have more than one child in here, right? So I can add another one in here if I want. We'll just say layer 2 for right now, and I'll name it something else. So you can have more than one layer in here. But this one is the primary, the parent. So anything you do to this one's going to change these. So if I go to combat, you see all the buttons are the same as this as your parent. Um, and if you notice, the text is highlighted. So like if it's bright, it's highlighted. But if I come down to combat, everything gets muted. That's because it's showing that it's using the default or your primary button configuration for that assigned for those buttons. So in Combat, let's say for instance I want to change this to middle mouse. I'm going to change it to middle mouse, back it up. You'll see now it's highlighted. That means that that button's been changed. All right, and then if I go up to menu, it's still right mouse. If I go to layer 2, it's still right mouse because it's using the parent configuration. Okay, so basically this is kind of like, to me, it's like a super action set, and I'll explain that here in a second. It's because you basically can assign any button instead of being well, not a super action set, I'm sorry, more like a super mode shift is what it's like. And because you can assign any button to be the mode shift, or you can even assign it to be act like an action set, change over to action set. So all right, so if I want to change this back to default, what you have to do is come up to the button, go inside, and then clear it out, hit X to remove, right? And then when you come back out, you see it's back to right mouse, and it's not bright highlighted anymore. That means it's back to default. Okay, so if you ever want to clear it out, you can do it that way. So the more advanced things that you can do with this. So how do you switch? First off, let's talk about how you switch to these. It's the same way that you would do an action set, except you got to give it a couple commands here. So for instance, let's say I want this to be in my Combat. I'm going to change this back to left click, right? So, or left mouse. So my Combat's now left mouse, but my default is middle mouse, okay? So how do I switch to Combat? Well, let's go in here. I'm going to show you real quick how you do that. You're going to go to the button that you want to make it switch to. So I'm going to use the left trigger in this instance, and we're going to delete this, and we're going to go Combat, right? Because that's what it's going to be doing, is switching to Combat. We're going to go to the same way that you would do an action set. Click on this, come down, and we're going to apply an action layer, right? And I'll show you a couple ways that this can be done, because you can either do a click and release and it switches, and then click and release and it switches back, or you can hold, and while you're holding it, it switches over, and then when you release it, the hold, it'll switch back. So depending on how you want to set this up, if you want to set it up in a way that, you know, it's a kind of like a mode shift, or more like an action set switch, switching to an action set. So apply layer, come down, and we want layer, oh wait, we're on default, my fault. We need to come back up here to menu, because we're setting this up. Sorry about that, guys. So we're on, make sure you're on your primary, right? Delete that, we're gonna make this Combat. And come over, apply layer, and Combat, okay? So whenever we full pull, it's going to switch to that, right? Now you come to your layer that you're switching to, because we want to be able to switch back. And we're going to say this is default, right? Or menu, which is what we named it, right? We wanted to switch back to that parent action set. So we're going to remove the action layer, hit OK, and then we're removing Combat. It's no longer going to be, we're no longer going to be using it, and come down, and that's all you got to do. So now, let's see if we can toggle the HUD. Maybe it'll show. No, it's not showing. I was hoping it would show the button press, but it's not showing it. Yeah, it's not showing it. Okay. So if I press full pull, it's going to switch to Combat, meaning that this should be, a middle mouse now. I mean, let's see, make sure this is set up right. Menu, yeah, I'm in combat mode. And if I click it again, it should switch back, which, yeah, see, I can't click with my right trigger because it's using middle mouse now as my button. If you see, I have my middle mouse is actually set down here to lightning warp. It's not going to use it. So switching to combat is going to make it switch to a left click and it opens inventory, okay? So that's how layers pretty much work. Now, the other way you can do it is a hold and then release. So if you come to the combat, I'm in my default, my parent, right? I come back over here. We're going to go back in, come down. Actually, I'm sorry. Just go inside here. You don't have to change it because you already have everything set up. Go to your up activator, right, which is your back button down there. So you're going to hit that to come to activators. And we're going to make this a start press, right? Come to combat. And we're going to make this a release press, right? So we're going to go back to activators and do a release press. All right. So this is basically making that button act more like a mode shift. All right. So instead of being an action switch, because an action switch when you're doing an action set switch, you basically press it and it switches over. You don't really, I mean, I guess you could create a, well, I don't think you could create a mode shift to do that, maybe. So right now I have it behaving more like a mode shift. So if I go back out and I just hold it, while I'm holding it, it's going to switch over to combat, right? And then when I release it, it's going to go back to my menu, which I can't click on this anymore because it's acting like a middle mouse, okay? But if I hold it, now I can, it's acting like the left. So basically I'm switching between the two layers, and that's how you're gonna switch between layers. Now you can now the more advanced things that you can do with this, because people are like, well, why don't you just use mode shifts or action? Well, because with mode shifts, you're only limited to, and I'll show you whatever they have in the mode shift button, right? So on your pad clicks, you only can use left pad click and right pad click, but you can get really creative with doing this, and it makes it so much easier than doing an action set. So I'm going to show you an example. So in menu, which is my default parent, I'm going to come down to here. Now I'm going to use the directional pad as an example, because I mean, you could use other things, button pad. You could even use touch menu or mouse, or radio menu, whatever you want to use. But I think the directional pad would be the easiest to explain. So I could basically make each of these a mode shift, and which will give me more options of switching to different things that maybe different utilities I want to use. And so let's say, for instance, I use this left. I'm going to go tell it to switch to, okay. Actually, we're going to, because with combat's going to be my primary movement, and I am setting this up for myself. So I am going to actually make this a menu, a touch menu for right now. And just for an example, let's say, for instance, I want this to open up inventory, right? And we'll call this inventory for the set one. I'm going to give it a picture real quick. It doesn't have to be. We'll just use this for right now. I can always change it later. We'll say character, and what is it? I think it's C button. Character C. Passive tree is P. Okay. So character. Oops. Do C. Skills. I didn't put a picture of that character. I like to use a tree icon in this because it seems more appropriate with this game since the skill tree is so freaking massive. There should be a tree in here. There it is. It's not showing the picture change, but if you go back in, you can see it change, and I'll show you guys here in a second. You know, old school Dungeons and Dragons, pen and paper. That's a D&D. I would say, yeah, we could use this more like this. We'll use that for right now. Use whatever you want. So if I go back into character, you see it changed the icon over there. If I go into, you can see it's a tree over there now. We'll add one more, which, let's say, for instance, we'll do the world. We'll do the world map for right now. I can go back in and do it. So I think it's you. World map. Is that correct? Yeah. World screen. And then we'll go down and find this little map. This looks like a treasure map, but it'll do for right now. Okay. So if I go back out and I use my, I got to put in 4 buttons. That's what I'm using right now. You can see it changed these. So if I click on this, it's going to open my inventory. Click on this, character sheet, skill tree, and world map. So I basically turned my left thumb pad, into a touch menu. And what I want to do, because when I'm going to be moving around, I'm going to be in combat mode most of the time. So I'm going to change this right here to work with it. So on the left directional pad, I'm going to hit apply action layer. Hit OK. Remove. I'm sorry, guys. Remove action layer. Combat. Okay. All right. So the reason I'm doing that is because I'm probably going to be in combat mode. And the reason that I'm putting combat as my secondary is because I like to use mouse region. And mouse region is kind of glitchy when you're trying to use go into your programming buttons. All right, because I'll show you. When I hit the Steam button, maybe they fixed it. No, it's because I'm in default right now. Maybe they fixed it. That'd be awesome if they fixed this. Combat, apply action layer. see. Okay, so I'm in default. Click. Oh, it's because I got to apply. Okay, so right now this is combat. I forgot I have this on hold to switch. And if I hit the middle Steam button, do you see how it's making the mouse move? It's back to center. I want to say it's doing something weird where it thinks that I'm trying to use chord Steam. So I don't know. I'm just tapping. It's not bringing up the menu. It's just a weird bug. So as long as I go back to my default menu, I can hit the middle button and it brings up the controller config. It's a weird thing, but I do like using mouse region just to move around. It's something, I won't go into big detail, but it's something I feel like um, I can, once you get used to it, you can actually maneuver pretty well. And I think it's more accurate and quicker than using the thumb pad, right? And I will take a second. I tell you, it takes a second to get used to, okay? Anyway, so I wanted to switch to combat mode. We were talking about this layer. So in menu right here, it's a touch menu. I need to go in here and tell it whenever first off, I want to be able to touch and release mode here. Basically, that means that when I hover over it and I just release my thumb, it just automatically, I don't have to click. There's no clicking involved, right? I prefer that rather than having to click down on the thumb pad. All right, so we have that set there to touch and release. We're going to go ahead and show activators. We're going to add an activator. So, and we're going to say release press. Binding, and we're going to say apply action layer combat, right? Because I want it to switch to combat after I've used it, right? And then I have to do that for every single one that I've set up here, right? Release press, and oops, apply combat. And just give me a second. We'll get this all set up. Oops. Yeah, I'm doing this right. And one more. Add activator. Okay. So we have that all set up, and I'll just show you how it works real quick. So when I bring up the menu, now what's going to happen is as soon as I release this, it's going to switch to combat mode, okay? And you can see I'm in my mouse. Well, you can't really see this, but I'm moving the mouse now with mouse region control, okay? Now, if I hit, let's say, for instance, I'll show you. There's one more thing we have to do. Go to combat. Just want to make sure. This requires click. I'm going to turn this off. And the reason is, like I said, I prefer touching the pad than clicking on it. You can leave it on, but I'm going to, for right now, I'm going to turn it off because I just want to touch it. Okay. So, and one more thing is we got to change this to a start press. So as soon as we start to press it, it's gonna do it. It's gonna activate that. All right. So let's go. We're in combat mode now, right? Now if I hit left, it's gonna bring up the menu, and as soon as I select one, it's gonna take it off the menu. So I'm switching back and forth between the two now just by touching, right? And I gave myself 4 things that I can activate, and then it switches back to my combat mode. So I'm going back and forth between combat and menu, okay? That means that you can assign pretty much, let's see, that means you can assign pretty much any button, right, to this directional pad, right? So for instance, let's say I want left to be my potions, right? I can go in there and do that. I can go, okay, this will, first off, we're in default, so we want to apply action layer, right? And we're going to say, oops, remove, because we're actually in combat, I think. Yeah, we're in combat. Okay, so confusing myself. There's so many things you got to do. Remove action layer, combat, because we want it to go back to menu, my default. And then, so we got that set up. Now we're going to go back to menu. And I'm sorry, this is going to be, because we got to create a new one. So this is going to be potions, right? So it's a good way to show the second layer here. I'm going to go ahead and call this my potions, or whatever, pots, whatever you want to call them. Okay, so go back to combat, because we're going to apply a new one. We want to switch to apply action layer, potions, okay? And then go up to potions layer, and we're going to make this, you know, just for fun, let's just make it a radial menu, okay? So we're going to go 1 here. Oops. 1, 2. Oh, wait. I forgot to put the 2. Doesn't really matter. Okay, 3. And 4. For right now, we'll just use that. Okay. And we do have a 5. I don't know why I did that. 4. Okay. And if you know anything about Path of Exiles, there are actually 5 potions, right? So maybe we want to add a 5th in there, right, for 5. So what you can do under well, I guess maybe you can't. Center unselected button might be able to do that. Say 5. Let's just remove it for right now. I don't want anything weird to happen. I've never tried this before with the center unselected. So you do have to go into each one of these and tell it and actually add the activator and do everything that you did with the other one. So we want to remove, oops, yeah, remove action layer and go back to combat. So we're going to remove potions because that's what we're currently in. And do everything the same that way. Release press. Do this a couple more times here, guys. All right, let's see. Okay, so we got all of them set up. The last thing you want to do is make sure that this menu is set to touch release. and we should be good to go on our potions. So if I come back to the menu, um, right now I'm in combat mode, which is going to be my primary use, right? Um, so now what I can do is if I hit on the right side, you can see it brings up a radial menu now, right? And then I come in and it's going to use that potion. So, and I can use a touch menu too. It depends on what you want to use. You can even use buttons if you wanted to. You don't have to make these menus. If you don't want the visual cue, you can make this a button or a directional pad, right? So you can see it's what it's doing is like now if I hit left, it's bringing up the other thing, and if I hit right, it's bringing up this thing, right? So, um, and I stay in my combat mode, and it brings me right back to where my combat mode is. So that's kind of a little bit more advanced things that you can do with action sets that you can't really do without them. I mean, you can create, with the action layers, you can create action sets and kind of get away with this, but you lose the touch release aspect of that. So, and the other thing is, you can pretty much, so all your buttons stay the same, and you're only affecting a few things, and so you're not having to recreate everything, which you would have to do if you created a new action set. Yeah, you can copy things over and do it that way, but and then but then if you change something in your default, and it's not going to change it over here. So if I change, and that's the benefit of layers, is that if you change something in the default, it's going to change it. It won't change anything though that you've changed in the layers. So if I went up to menu and I did change this touch menu to something else, it's not going to change it in combat because I've assigned that specific thing to make sure it does that, right? So it is definitely regular place. I wonder why it was showing it up in the right here. Oh, it's 3. Maybe I removed something. So anyways, that's some advanced things that you can do with action layers. There's other things. I mean, pretty much, it's up to you on how you want to apply those layers. One thing is, like, say for instance, okay, so while I'm in combat, here's another thing. While I'm in combat, right? Let's get out of this here. Okay. While I'm in combat mode, right? If I want more precision, like for some reason I feel like I need to use my mouse, because right now I'm using mouse region and it works. I mean, after a while you get used to being able to grab things and move because you're only going to have controller control. You don't have the thumb pad. But if you want to be able to use a mouse pad, what I like to do is I'll come here to combat, right? And I'll come to additional settings. In the outer ring binding, typically what that means is, like, when your thumb reaches the outer ring, it's going to apply something. I'm going to invert that, right? And what that's going to do is make it in the inside instead of the outside. So now that becomes almost like a button. So we're going to say remove action layer combat, right? And then so now when I touch that center part in the center of this directional pad, it's going to remove it and go back to menu, right? So So now I'm using my right thumb pad because in default, that's what it does, right? It's just going to do this. Of course, you have to get used to that being there, but you can all. It's just an example of what you can do with the directional pad and the middle button. So, and then when you release it, you should be able to go back, and you can even set it up to where, let's say, for instance, in my menu. So you're on mouse pad here, right, in menu. On touch binding here, you can go apply action layer. We're going to say combat. Okay. And make sure that you do this a release press because you only want it to happen when it release presses. Right? Actually, in combat, you want to make sure this is set to start press. I mean, it still works, but I would suggest doing that. That way. Okay, so, and as soon as, actually you could, this actually might work better. Think about it. Oops. Let's make that just a regular button. Maybe, maybe? Yeah. So you have to hold it for it to actually continue to work, right? Keep your thumb in the middle. For it to work. And it looks like I'm going to have to... I am building this for myself, guys, so I'm kind of tweaking this out a little bit. Oh, no. It did. Nope, it didn't. Maybe. Look at that. It did switch. So if you tap the center and release it before touching any of the others, because the way those buttons are set up, let's switch. Oh, it's because I lifted up my thumb. As soon as I lift up my right thumb on my right pad, it's going to switch it back because that's the way I have it set. So it's going to stay in this mode. And then as soon as I lift my thumb, it's going to switch back to combat mode, which works pretty good, actually. Now look at that. We're going to go to inventory. Yeah, I'm going to have to mess with this a little bit. So in here, I'm going to do the dead zone, maybe? No, the outer ring binding radius. I'm going to have to mess with this. This makes it bigger. I just don't know how it's going to react on the inside. Let's make this smaller. Trying to figure out a good dead zone in there. Maybe oh, you know what? I do have to make the dead zone a little bit bigger. That way it doesn't activate those directional pads as much. So right now it seems to be activating. Oh. That's what it is. Yeah. Yeah, that'll work. Anyways, something you guys can look at if you. I hope this helps you kind of come up with some creative ideas on what you can do with layers. I mean, that's just one thing of many things that you can do. And I'm sure that there's lots of others. If you guys have any good tricks that you use, leave them in the comments. I'd be happy to give them a try because I love using the Steam controller. It's so much you can do. and I really like looking at new things and what I can do and playing with and toying around with it. So if you guys like this video, give me a like, and good luck. Have fun.